I'd like to start this meeting first by welcoming all of you in attendance. Thank you for joining us. It's nice to see friendly faces in the audience. For the record, it is Tuesday, June 26th at 6 p.m. We'll start with roll call attendance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Milam.
Here.
Councilmember Burnt.
Here.
Councilmember Palmer. Here. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Kavanagh.
Here.
Councilmember Borton.
Here.
Mayor DeVeerd.
Here. Item number 2 is a Pledge of Allegiance. If you all rise and join us in the pledge to our flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Me too.
Item 3 is the community invocation. Is Daryl here? I don't see him. So I will go ahead and move to item 4, which is adoption of the agenda.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Borton.
There are no additions to the agenda, but I would ask to move item 8C to item 8A. Field naming request. Smart. And with that amendment, I would approve or move that we approve the amended agenda. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Madam Mayor, for item number 5, we had several sign-ups this evening, but all of them indicate that they want to participate in what is now item 8A, which is the Cape Marshall field naming request.
Okay, very good. We will then move to item 6 as our consent agenda.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Borton.
With no changes to the consent agenda, I would move that we approve it as published and for the mayor to sign and yes. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Milam.
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt.
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer. Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts.
Aye.
Councilmember Kavanagh.
Aye.
Councilmember Borton.
Aye.
All ayes. There were no items moved from the consent agenda, so we'll move to item 8, on the amended agenda, 8A, which was the previous 8C, and consider the Cape Marshall field naming request. Hi, Colin.
Madam Mayor, did you mean to say Supervisor of the Year, Colin?
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification, Treg.
It's great to have royalty in our midst.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm here to simply introduce this item. I won't spend too much time, but I will, of course, answer questions if you have them. So I will leave it to those behind me to kind of give a description of who Kate was and what she meant to them. But our experience, our department's experience, it really started with a phone call with the desire to hold Kate's funeral services on Field 8 at Settlers Park, which we were honored to oblige in that request. And so that took place in the spring, summer of last year. And since then, the way that we've kind of described the creation of an engraved rock and a sign is a bit of, well-intentioned folks that got a little bit ahead of themselves in creating that rock and sign without coming to the Meridian Parks and Recreation Department and consulting us before creating those things and before placing them at the field. And so basically what happened is those items came to the park. They were placed without the knowledge of the Parks and Recreation Department. We worked with them to try and find a better, we worked with them to try to remove the rock from the park initially so that we could go through this process. It ended up staying at the park for quite a while. The sign is actually still at the park now. It's on field number 8, and the rock currently is at Memorial Monuments. It was removed in September after the conclusion of the Cape Marshall Memorial Tournament that took place at Settlers Park. And so I think it's important to note that Marty Marshall and Trent Marshall, Kate's parents, were not at all involved in that process, and they've kind of taken over within the last couple of months to take over this process, to do it the right way. And so with that being said, we took this item to the Meridian Parks and Recreation Commission earlier this month as per our field naming policy, or our park naming policy. And it was heard by the commission. The commission was extremely supportive. They voted unanimously to recommend to the council to place the rock, to leave the sign where it is, and in addition, they voted to add something else at that field that would give a little context to those two other items so that those who saw those in the future would know a little bit of the backstory of Kate. So what we have before you tonight is this request to rename field number 8 at Settlers Park after Kate Marshall. And then with all these, some of these items that have already been talked about, it's a bit of a unique request because normally with a park naming request, we would come to you and ask first to name a facility after an individual, and then after that go through the process of deciding what we would do to memorialize that person at that location. This request, first decision is going to be whether or not to name the field, and then second decision will be to what to do to honor her at that field. And the unique part is, of course, that we have an existing rock, we have an existing sign, and we also have a recommendation from the commission to do something a little bit extra to provide some context. And so what we were hoping for from tonight's meeting is, of course, the first decision, but then also some direction from council on what you would like to do with the items that we already have created. So with that, I'll stand for questions before I introduce Beth Toll, who is going to be the representative for the family tonight to speak on their behalf.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Burnt.
Madam Mayor, thank you, Colin. Welcome, everyone. There's a lot of people here to support this application. We welcome you. Quick question. Can you give us some details in regard to the bio? That's not normal protocol when it comes to our, naming facilities or naming fields. Can you give us some insight on what that bio is going to, what's it going to say? Where's it going to be at?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Councilman Burnt, that's a good question. I think, if we do something, a bio, then what we would do is really the normal process. We would decide here at this meeting that we want to do something like that, and then our department would work with the family to come up with, the location of where that would go and what it's going to say. And so I couldn't say at all right now what that would say. What we would want if council decides that they would like something like that. It's impossible for me to say right now how long that would be or what kind of details would be included. So yeah, we would work with the family on that though if that was what council wishes.
So Colin, can you tell us what the naming policy is?
Sure. So the procedure for naming a park facility, we have a couple page document, and essentially what happens is the applicant submits to the Parks and Recreation Department a bio of the individual that the facility they would like to name the facility after, and it just provides some context about who they were, what connection do they have to that specific facility and to the community as a whole. We then take that application to the Parks and Recreation Commission. The commission, hears that request and hears any public comment about that individual or why they, support or don't support that request. And then the commission votes to make a recommendation to the council. And then the council, as we're here tonight, makes the final decision on whether or not that facility will be named after that individual.
Okay, thank you.
So we are at the last step.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milo.
Colin, is a photograph usually part of that bio?
Typically it would be, yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Just a comment for you, Colin. Appreciate the memo. I can tell that a lot of time and thought was put into kind of summarizing how we got here today, and I think a special attention to the family and all those involved to make sure that everything was reported accurately. I really appreciate that. Made it very easy to come tonight with a easy decision to be made.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further from council? Okay.
So at this time, yeah, I'd like to turn it over to Beth Toll, who is going to speak on behalf of the family.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Beth. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Absolutely. My name is Beth Toll. I live at 1980 South Daisy Place in Boise.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Beth Toll, and I am a friend of the Marshall family, and they've asked me to speak on their behalf this evening, and I really appreciate the opportunity to say a few words about Kate and this important request. As I'm sure you noticed from the pre-work materials you read in preparing for tonight's meeting, Kate Marshall was an exceptional young lady. She was a native of Meridian, and while her team's travels for softball took her all over the state, she spent countless hours at Settlers Park practicing and playing the game she loved. Field 8 was Kate's home field, a place that gave her confidence, joy, and inspiration. So it's very appropriate for the field to hold the permanent memorial that we're requesting tonight. Kate was a straight-A student at Rocky Mountain High who went out of her way to show kindness to others. From a young age, Kate was the one who, without hesitation, would extend a hand to help another classmate. She was the one that would pick the child for a team or a class project that maybe no other kids would pick. She saw someone in need. If she saw someone in need, she would find a way to help them, a lesson modeled for her by her amazing parents. Kate contributed a great deal of energy and kindness to the softball community, too. She regularly helped young players, serving as a role model and a mentor for girls just beginning the sport she loved. Kate represented the essence of team. She was a fierce competitor with a work ethic that matched. Kate was respectful to her coaches, eager to learn, and loyal to her teammates. You can see from the amount of support from the softball community here tonight, Kate was loved and respected as both a player and a teammate. I honestly could go on and on about Kate, and I know that many in this room wish that we could. We love to talk about Kate and remember her. But I understand, however, that we're here tonight focused on one request. And I also understand that as council members, you have a number of considerations when responding to a request like ours. What I would leave you with is this. As we think about the community we are trying to build, the environment we are all interested in raising our children in, we want to be mindful of the role models we hold up and ways in which we recognize and highlight the values we hold dear. Kate Marshall is a shining example of those values and an incredible example of what is right with the youth in our community. She was so many things: a daughter, sister, friend, teammate, but most of all, she was a good role model for all of us. Honoring her memory with a permanent memorial at Settlers Park is an important and meaningful way that we can honor her memory and inspire Kate's love of softball and her love of community in others. On behalf of the Marshall family and the many people who loved and were inspired by Kate, I respectfully ask for your approval of our request to name field number 8 at Settlers Park and place the memorial items we've discussed in honor of Kate Marshall. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Beth. Council, do you have any questions for Beth?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Beth, I'm sure I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it. I assume you'd be willing to work with park staff on a bio or some sort, whatever. The council decided they wanted to do something extra, you'd be willing to work with staff to put that together?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? So Beth, how do you anticipate seeing this going? I assume you're the spokesperson for the entire room.
I don't know if I can say that, but I know I am for the family. So I'm sure there are others who have some things that they'd like to share too if there's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council, this is not a public hearing, but would you like to hear a couple more comments? Good evening. If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Emily Allant, 4688 West Victory Road, Meridian, Idaho.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Emily Allant. I was born here in Meridian, but I am a military dependent, so I started my softball journey in North Carolina. I did not know Kate until we played on the Meridian Youth All-Star team together when we were 10. I did, however, know about Mo Brooks and Roger Wolf due to how my father spoke about the influences these great men had on his childhood. My dad speaks highly of both men who now have Meridian fields named after them. They were part of a great community and now have legacies left in their names. Because we lost our Kate at such a young age, she was unable to have as many years to make her mark with this community, but make the difference that she did. I am asking you today to let us name Settlers Park Field 8 after Kate Marshall and place a plaque about her character so that she may leave behind her legacy. Not because this field was her home field, as it was for many of us, but because Kate is deserving as a great community member to represent a legacy field. Kate is a shining example of what hard work and heart you get in life. Kate was not recommended by her coach to go to all-star tryouts, but she went anywhere and made our team. Kate did not have a position she was dominant in, but she practiced daily on her own and made herself into an excellent infielder. Kate had fight and determination, but above all, she had heart. Kate sent my father to the hospital to get stitches in his chin after ripping a line drive back at his face. After all, he deserved it for underestimating her hitting ability. He knew it and she knew it, but she baked him cookies anyway. Kate always baked for us when we were sick. She defended anyone who was ever picked on or bullied. She had no tolerance for anyone who was a bad teammate. She loved deeply and was fisty enough to let you have it if you were out of line. I last saw Kate on Tuesday, the week that she passed, too weak to play in her district game with Rocky Mountain. She was wrapped in a blanket cheering from the sidelines. I have seen Kate play with broken bones and torn ligaments, so I knew that she was very ill that day if she was sitting in her blanket in the stands. I could have never known that would have been the last time many of us saw her. She was the person, though. She always showed up for her people. Kate was a year younger than most of us on the Boise Blast team, so when we moved to high school, she was left behind for the spring season. But she made us bows in all of our different colors for good luck at tryouts. Sorry. She also came to cheer on at our games. I am truly lucky that my father was stationed back here so I could be a part of this community. I'm blessed to have known and played with Kate. Help us honor her life by using her as an example for the best of our youth. You have an opportunity today to not only give back to her family, who is also greatly involved in youth sports in our valley, but to use Kate as an icon for upcoming little girls to recognize that having a selfless heart and pure determination can get you where you need to be. Thank you.
Thank you for that heartfelt testimony. Council, do you have any questions? You can grab a Kleenex on your way back. Is there anyone else who would like to comment, other than all of you? Good evening.
Good evening. Clint Shiflett, 5064 North Mendelssohn Avenue in Meridian. I don't know if you have enough Kleenexes here for the room, honestly. I had the honor and privilege of coaching against Kate, and I used her as an example to my teammates on how to play the game. She was a teammate of my daughter's in high school and on her travel team occasionally. When I would coach against Kate, when we played on different teams, she was always a person you didn't want to see coming up in the bottom of the last inning with tying runs on base because you know she would pull through. If you approve this resolution for Kate, you not only honor Kate, you honor her memory, but you honor the way she played the game. You honor the game of softball for Kate. She played the game the way it's supposed to be played. She respected the game, she respected her coaches, she respected her teammates, and she respected her opponents. And she even respected the umpires when they made the wrong decision. But by doing this, you set an example for all those girls that are coming up. And by placing Kate's name there and having that biography, you allow others to have that same opportunity. And I strongly urge you to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hi. Casey Schneid, 4268 North Portage Avenue, Meridian. Madam Mayor, members of the council. I've had multiple opportunities to work with female athletes over the past 31 years as a player, a teacher, and a coach. I have seen how sports can have a huge impact on girls and their success in life, not just in sports. In fact, research shows that female athletes are more likely to graduate from college and more likely to be successful in their chosen career than non-athletes. The character values that are learned through sports are the main reason for this success. Kate Marshall represented these values both on and off the field. She was a strong leader with an amazing work ethic. She was kind, encouraging, and supportive of her teammates. She also encouraged and motivated younger athletes in their games, practices, and at clinics. Kate was one of the most coachable athletes I have worked with, and I would encourage all young athletes to strive to be like Kate. After Kate's passing, it was evident that I was not the only one that recognized these strong core values that Kate possessed. Through the stories that were shared about Kate around the valley, I learned that there were a countless number of softball players, coaches, and families that Kate made an impact on. She was a role model whose work ethic and positive attitude will be remembered forever. It is important for future female athletes to have strong role models to look up to. By honoring her name at the softball field at Settlers Park, it provides young ladies a very strong role model that any parent would want their child to strive to be. I truly hope that you can see the value that this will bring to our community for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jake Taylor, 2011 West Trussell Drive, Meridian, Idaho. My wife and I have been in education for 25 years, all in Meridian here in the Treasure Valley. My wife's an administrator in the district. I'm a teacher and coach, and I was fortunate enough to coach Kate the last year of her passing. And everything you've heard tonight is what I was going to talk about. So the word that I describe Kate most is selfless. My family and I are moving in the next couple weeks, and we're taking Kate with us. And sure hoping to come back, we can see something at Settlers Park. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Good evening. Yes, you can pull that puppy down.
My name is Brooklyn Schneid, 4268 North Portage Avenue, Meridian, Idaho.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I was lucky enough to spend time with Kate at the softball fields after I joined the Boise Blast. I admired Kate because she was always working hard, even when her team wasn't playing. She would go support other teams in the Blast, including mine. Though I never got to play with Kate or go to school with her, I saw how she was so hardworking and dedicated to what she did. The rock that was created isn't going to just be a rock at the field. It is going to help girls see how important she was to the community. It is also showing how she was kind, strong, hardworking, and how she was a role model to everyone. Kate was a role model to me, and I hope that she can continue to be a role model for other girls through the memories that we share at Kate's Field. So thank you, and I hope you see what this rock really means.
Thank you, Brooklyn. I think you all have written the text of what has been asked to be put on the field. Good words. I think council, yes, sir.
Justin Klosko, 3627 North Elsinore, Meridian, Idaho.
Thank you.
I wasn't going to talk, and I am because we're a rival of Kate. And she's everything I want my kids to be. And I'm not just talking about my players, I'm talking about my personal kids. I coach college ball at several universities, and she's the kid that we recruit. She's the example of what we want at the college level. And I think you guys have heard enough, and I think it's pretty simple. But, and I think the last girl that talked just killed me. That was hard. And same with all these people that have talked about her. But you guys, she amplifies everything that you want your kids to be, whether they're an athlete or not. And I think that's what we do when we dedicate a field to somebody. It's not just about athletics. So I just want you guys to know that. It's from a rival, not just from their family or their friends and stuff like that. And that's from our whole organization, from Meridian, Idaho to Washington. We have teams up there, and they think the same way. So I just want you guys to know it's not just here, it's another state too.
Thank you. And it's not that we haven't heard enough. I think we heard all the right things and even more. So thank you to all those who provided testimony and words. I think this council certainly has a lot of good information to make a decision on. Is there anyone that needs to get another word in? I think just all of you being here speaks volumes. Council, any questions? Okay, you have an action item in front of you and a request and a recommendation from our Parks Commission to name Field 8 the Kate Marshall Field. Mr. Burt.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the field naming, the rock, the bio, everything presented to us in behalf of Kate Marshall.
Second.
I have a motion and a second, and probably a third, a fourth, a fifth, and a sixth. Any discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Borton.
this is really special, seeing everybody here sharing these stories. There's comments coming to us about the city, asking for the city to recognize and honor this special member of our community. But it is very clear to us up here that that is being done every day by each of you. The city will certainly take the right steps to honor her memory and legacy with this request, but it's readily apparent each and every one of you whose lives she touched honor her legacy every day. And from what we take in what we've seen here and what we've read coming into today, that each of you also have an opportunity after today to go forward and in honor of her legacy, the way I see it, and compete harder and to act with integrity and compassion the way she has and the way it's been described. I think one of the greatest tributes to someone as special as Kate, not only to name the field and hope people will ask, who's Kate Marshall in years down the road, so we all get a chance to tell a story of how she touched our lives or what she meant. I think it's really neat to watch this group of individuals who all coached her, coached against her, grew up with her, to have that lifelong opportunity to honor her legacy every day. in how you conduct yourself, and the way she's been described, I think, is a wonderful testament to a role model example for all of us up here and for everyone down there. So I think today is certainly an appropriate, special recognition that's well-deserved. But I think that legacy and those steps continue tomorrow for all of us, too. And that's a gift Kate Marshall gave all of us. And today's a great example and a great reminder for us for that going forward. So very pleased to see this being approved, and very pleased to see all of us committing to take those steps to honor her legacy going forward and how she conducted herself. So it's a special kid.
And as Councilman Borton so articulated, is it's up to all of us who have heard Kate's story to have it live through all of us. So hopefully you're all ambassadors that leave tonight to continue to keep the meaning behind this field naming alive, as to really establish her legacy that you spoke of tonight. Very compelling, and it's something I think that we can all aspire to, is living life the way you've described that Kate has. So it is a challenge to all of us. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer? Aye. Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Thank you so much for sharing just a little piece of Kate tonight, and we look forward to seeing you out there as the signs go up and the rock is placed, and hopefully we'll all live that legacy.
Madam Mayor.
Thanks for joining us. Yes, Mr.
One question.
Byrne.
What was her number? Aye.
Yeah, put your fives.
Thank you. Okay, you don't have to stay,
Oh, but you can.
but you certainly can. Did I tell you that second call, Emily? Okay, Council, I'll go ahead and move to the original 8A, which is the final plat for H 2018-0053, and ask for staff comments. Well, there's staff.
Here we are. Madam Mayor, members of council, pleasure to be with you. This is the applicant has applied for a final plat approval for 52 building lots and 8 common lots on approximately 15 acres of land in the R8 zoning district. The proposed plat is a substantial compliance with the approved preliminary plat as required. And it's my understanding that the applicant is in agreement, written agreement with the staff report.
Okay, Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
I move we approve H 2018-0053.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 8A. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Item 8B is final plat for H 2018-0055. I will ask for staff comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This also is a final plat request consisting of 10 building lots on approximately 23 acres of land in an IL zone. The proposed plat is in substantial compliance with the approved preliminary plat as required. The applicant has also submitted written agreement with the staff report.
Thank you. Council, any further information needed? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
I move we approve H 2018-0055.
Okay.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 8B. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried. Item 8C has already been heard. Item 8D, under our fire department.
Madam Mayor, Council, good evening. Before I get started with the budget amendment, I just want to say thank you and commend you for the Kate Marshall field naming. My daughter, as some of you know, played softball, played against Kate, went to the state tournament that year, and our girls all wear purple bows in their hair. It's a bow thing in softball, but good choice. Good choice.
Wow.
With that, we do have a budget amendment this evening. I briefly mentioned this during the budget hearing process a couple of weeks ago. This is for the decon sinks in our decon room. Decon is short for decontamination. So this is a room where our firefighters come back. They've been on a call in which they've had equipment, clothing, PPE contaminated with a number of different body substances. I'll just leave it at that. Under our infection control plan, based upon an OSHA recommendation, also the State EMS Bureau requires us to have an infection control plan. The cleaning of that equipment is done in a specified room in which they glove up and they use the sinks to decon their equipment. When our current fire stations were built, for some reason those were built out of wood with Formica covering. That is not best practice at all. Additionally, they put drop-in sinks instead of built-in sinks. So imagine that you have some stuff that you're washing off. You want that to drain properly. You want a built-in sink so that that all drains into the sink the proper way. So last budget year, we came to you with a budget amendment, a G100 request. I apologize. We had gotten pricing for at the time for those sinks. I mentioned this during the budget hearing. Those sinks were considerably less than what they are today, a year and a half later. So basically, we have enough money to do one station. That leaves 3 left over. I know Councilman Cavanagh, you asked for pictures of those sinks. So this picture here with the red tape all over it is such a picture. It didn't turn out great, but you can see that there's a lot of chipping going on. And if you look at the Formica of those countertops and the sinks, you see the chipping at every station. In the background, you should have a one-piece splash. You can see that's 2 pieces. You can see that the sink is actually built on top of the counter instead of sunk in. So when you go to drain everything, it drains properly. The second picture you have is what a proper sink should look like. You can see a rolled front edge. It's a one-piece backsplash, and the sinks are down so that when things drain off of the equipment that we're washing down, they drain into the sink the proper way. It keeps contamination contained to where it needs to be and not soaking into exposed wood or into the backsplash area or around the sink edges. So the request for the amendment is $27,900. The sinks, it's a one-piece sink. It needs to be plumbed in. Those are $9,300 a piece. As I mentioned, we have enough to get that done at Fire Station 1. As you know, I don't like coming before you with budget amendments. It's not the funnest thing to do. However, I think this is important enough to bring before you as a budget amendment so we can get this done for the safety of our firefighters. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions?
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Cavanagh.
Mark, just a question in terms of the contribution from the rule. So is the total $27,900 plus the dollars from the rule, or is this amount technically, is the total spend going to be less when you factor in the amount from the rule?
Yeah, the total is 27.9, so, excuse me, the rural will get a invoice for that. Their contribution right now is 11%, so we didn't incorporate that into the request.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, thank you, Chief. Okay, Council,
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
did you have another question?
Thank you, Councilmember Palmer, Madam Mayor. Not a question, maybe it is a question, would this body prefer to have a clean budget amendment that reflects the total request amount? Before us is $27,900, but the department doesn't need $27,900 to purchase the item when you factor in the rural contribution. Or if the chief wants to give us an explanation about how that works in terms of invoicing the rural, or maybe Mr. Neri, who grabs the mic, somebody who's more of an expert about how our partnership.
I'll give you the operations side, and then Mr. Neri can chime in. Typically, through finance, what we do is we supply the
spending authority.
Yeah. What's that?
You get spending authority. It has to be the entire amount.
Yep.
The revenue will offset.
You said it better than I would.
Works for me. Thank you.
We're going to jack that up.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
I move we approve the fire department budget amendment for the stainless steel decontamination sinks for the fire stations.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes. Item 8E is also under Fire Department for a budget amendment for public education supplies. Hello, Pam.
Hi there. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Thank you so much for hearing this spending request. So we are asking for an authorization to spend in the amount of $15,821. These are monies that have already been received via grants or donations that came in during FY 2018. These funds will be spent on public education supplies, and then also we have already taught a class for car seat technicians for our last recruit academies. We received a grant for those, and so we're just requesting to bring that money back in. So it's $15,821. So before you will see a total amendment request as being zero because that money has already been received.
That's awesome, and it's awesome to see these kind of community partners. Thank you, Pam.
Thank
Council, any questions?
No, ma'am.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
I move we approve the fire department budget amendment for public education supplies.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve item 8E. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh?
Aye.
Councilmember Borton?
Aye.
All ayes. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pam.
Pam, have a nice day.
Madam Mayor, can I
Mr.
brag?
Borton,
Real quick, I'm
yes.
just going to brag about Pam for a sec, totally off topic, but one of the many things you do, which is really fantastic, is provide the CPR and AED training to our businesses throughout the community. And we had you come out to our company and train our employees and staff, and things like that might not get a whole lot of notoriety and press, but it's fantastic. It can save lives, and you're wonderful at it, so thank you.
Thank you, and I think that that would be her opportunity to extend an invitation to all of you.
Thank you.
Right?
That's exactly what I was going to do. Yeah, exactly. So we do have 2 hands-only CPR classes coming up on July 11th, and then we will have a CPR certification class that's going to be in July as well. So we always send that out to the city. We would love to, train and certify each one of you. I think it's very, very important. And then I was going to say, just recently we had the opportunity to go to Sensi, and we trained 670 people over there on hands-only CPR and AED. So that's pretty amazing when you think about Heart Safe Meridian. So yeah, just super, super proud of that. So thank you for saying that.
And one of the reasons that Heart Safe Meridian received a City Achievement Award
That's
through
correct.
the Association of Idaho Cities. So
Well, and thank you
congratulations.
for that. So appreciate it.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you.
Mr. Burnt.
Personal invite, please.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
I'd like to do that on the 11th.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam.
8F is under our Community Development Director.
Madam Mayor, members of council, pleasure to be with you on this topic as well. Post the pre-proposal meeting with our potential participants in the old City Hall RFP, there were just a few, actually one question that wasn't already addressed in the previous addendum and or in the RFP. And so this is the second addendum to address that question specifically. So I'll just go through this really quickly. It's fairly straightforward. The question that was asked was essentially what is the the internet or the fiber capacity to the building, and so we answered that with the assistance of Rick Ritter that currently there's a 1 gigabit of installed capacity to the building, or that's being used currently, but then also that there's the potential of using 10 gigabits if needed. So that question was addressed, and then we've been in preparation of a draft. I guess let me back up. Two other items that we wanted to include in this addendum. The first was essentially an attendance list of those that were in participation, and then the third item, which was a little bit more obviously more work, was a draft development agreement. Of course, this is by no means the agreement that we would be entering into. It's just to give them an idea of what our general template would be like with the winning proposer. So with that, this is that's the content of the addendum, and look forward to answering any questions that you may have about the pre-proposal meeting or the process going forward, or whatever I can assist with.
Thank you, Cameron. Any questions? Mr. Palmer.
Turn your mic on. Oh. I had it on for all the previous items, my bad. I move we approve the old City Hall RFP amendment. No, hang on. I'm on the wrong item. RFP proposed addendum number 2.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 8F. Any discussion from council? Seeing none, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh? Aye. Councilmember Borton?
Abstain.
Okay, the ayes have it. 9A, council, in front of you, we wanted to introduce a topic that is not new to the city. When Sean and I talked, it was really something that had been discussed as early as when the Parks and Recreation Commission was first established. Again, reconsidered in front of council 10 years ago when Mr. Sidaway started as our director, and the council at that time had no interest in pursuing the idea further. It has been something that former Councilman Roundtree and I talked about a couple of years ago as they were exploring any duplication of services, as Boise was considering challenging the overlap of the services that Ward provides and the services they provided their citizens. As that was going through the process, Mr. Wardle became chair, and we have been meeting several times now to talk about the possibility of the city considering taking on Fuller Park. As probably most of you know, a lot of our citizens don't know the difference between a city-owned park and Western Native Recreation District. We feel we've had Todd Lavoie and Steve Sidaway and a couple of his team members working to look at what the public benefit would be, and working with Sean and his team in furthering those discussions. We wanted to have that discussion with you tonight, and so I'll ask Mr. Wardle if he would please join us at the podium.
Thank you. Sean Wardle, 2239 East Granter Street here in Meridian for all your fan mail. Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having me here today to discuss this item. I am the chairman of the Western Native Recreation District, which owns Fuller Park as well as the Meridian Community Pool. For the record, I'm going to note that we have one of our commissioners, Colin Moss, here in the audience. Colin, as you know, was here for an earlier item and is staying. We also have our Secretary-Treasurer, Carol White. And I noticed that we have a current commissioner named Tyler Roundtree, who is not here this evening, but former Commissioner Roundtree may stop back in from outside. So thank you very much for having me today. We are here to talk a little bit about duplication of services. And this item came up after the Western Native Recreation District ran a series of pool bonds, which did not pass. As part of that process, we had some citizens that were in the Western Native Recreation District that were citizens of Boise. And they approached the board and said, we feel like there's a duplication of services. We are paying Boise City taxes, which support the YMCA and the pool there. The board heard all of those issues, got some good legal opinions, and as part of that, we decided to remove those properties from our taxing district. And I would like to thank Carol publicly for making that happen. That was, I can tell you, not the easiest process, and we made it by 48 hours or so. Yep. So we made it by 4 days. So those properties have been removed from the taxing district. The board felt like that was the proper thing to do for those entities. We also began the discussion about what other kinds of services are duplicated. We asked for an Attorney General's opinion from that organization. They gave us an opinion that everything that we're doing currently is within the scope of our authority, within the scope of the state statute and our founding documents. But we're here today to talk about what is the community purpose. How can we better serve this community, and is there a partnership opportunity? I will say, just as a clarification, so we removed the properties from our taxing district. That was about 15% of our district. As part of our budget discussion, one of the things that we could have done as an entity is leave our budget the same. Obviously, the services were the same. Everything that we were doing remained the same. We just removed some of those properties. We felt like the taxpayers needed to see a savings as those properties were removed, so we reduced our budget by the amount of those properties. And so that's one of the things that we're here to talk about, is how could the taxpayers save money if there were partnerships, if there were some of those other items that we could work out with the city. So that was a sort of a long history of where we're at. Just to give you a quick snapshot of what the Western Native Recreation District is doing. We finished this May the finalization of our $3+ million pool project, and we've completely renovated that pool. If you haven't been out and been off the new high dive, please come and join us. It's a great experience. One of the things that the Western Native Recreation District did, certainly prior to my term, was save cash, and we did that entire project out of cash. We didn't put any debt on it. And the project is currently up and running. In addition to that, we have also taken on a new restroom project at Fuller Park. And so that is currently underway. We have a scheduled completion date, August? I think the 15th of August. It's a $400,000 plus project. I'll let Steve talk about how that meets the city standards, but we feel really good about where our facilities are. Again, that completely out of cash within the district. Now, saying that, the district has spent most of its cash for those particular facilities, and we're looking at what our budget looks like in the future. So, with that, I would stand for any questions that you might have.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Sean. Mr. Palmer.
Madam Mayor, Sean, I think I misheard you. Did you say you spent $400,000 on a bathroom?
Correct.
It is now.
Yep.
Yes.
Is it?
And it's
Two
ADA
tricks?
compliant.
Madam Mayor?
To clarify, we went through, let me back up and talk about that particular restaurant facility. We actually designed and bid it a year ago, and the bids came in significantly over $500,000. We put the project on hold, thought we had a more favorable bid environment, bid the project, and we've encountered a number of change orders, which has pushed us over the $400,000 to date.
Thank you, Mr. Burnt.
I think that maybe some of those unforeseen funds came because you didn't know that there was a septic. It was a septic situation, right? And
we recently, 2 weeks ago, had a little surprise and had designed the building to connect to city sewer, which was not in existence. We had a septic tank which was installed whenever the park was built, that it apparently served this community well.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Burnt.
Like, I heard that the backhoe sort of fell into it accidentally.
You hear too much.
It was not the most sanitary situation during construction, but again, it did last a long time.
Any other questions at this point? Mr. Sidaway has some additional information.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm here primarily to express from the Parks Department's perspective a willingness to look at taking on particularly the Fuller Park asset. We did conduct a site visit exactly 3 weeks ago today with myself, Sean Wardle, Mike Barton, and Roger Norberg from my staff. We did walk around and look at the different amenities. The playground has been recently updated. The restroom, as you just heard, is currently being updated. There are some older facilities in like the fencing around the ball fields, the dugouts need some work. Knowing what we know now about ADA, I do believe there are some ADA challenges out there regarding access to picnic shelters, things like that, I don't know for sure that they're there. What we need to do is go out and conduct an actual audit and then make a transition plan to address those over time in the future if we did take this on. But I do want, primarily I want to express my support for this concept of eliminating the overlap and having separate but complementary roles where Western Ada Rec District can continue to focus on their public aquatics, which is what they were originally formed to do. We will take on the park asset and add that to our inventory. We maintain parks well. It's something I think we do, and would like to add that to our list of facilities. We get a lot of calls already about the facility, even though we don't own it. Like was already mentioned, a lot of people don't know there's a difference between Western Ada Rec's facilities and our own. And then just to maybe just a word about what we're asking for tonight. We're not asking for any formal council action, but we are asking for direction. If this is a non-starter, we'd like to know now before we spend some time working on this. But if there is interest on the council, then we would like to know that so that we can continue investigating this and come up with a plan for this potential transfer.
Okay, council.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Either Madam Mayor or Steve or Sean, somebody, you'll have to, I guess, excuse me. Despite this being something of significant interest of mine, it sounds like there's been lots of discussions that have happened over the past few weeks and months. This is the first that I'm hearing that the Parks Department is supportive of only taking over one of the parks. Am I hearing you right? There's resistance or opposition to the pool facility as well? Can somebody get me caught up to date as to the conversations that have occurred? Sounds like have occurred.
Yeah,
over
not
the
so much
past 12 or
opposition
14
as,
months?
sorry. Not opposition, just the idea that we would take care of the overlap with the parks, but let them continue to fill their role with the pool, which they do well. And if the council wants us to look at taking over the pool also, that's something we can also look into and come back to the council with pros and cons.
I think it's important to note that Western Native Recreation District has been working with some partners about different ideas for the aquatic piece, and I'd say we do parks well, and they have shown they have a successful model with their aquatics that why tinker with it? Mr. Wardle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilman Cavanagh. I skipped a step in my presentation. I apologize. One of the questions that the Western Native Recreation District has asked our legal counsel and has sought from the state statute is, could the Recreation District dissolve? Is there a way to dissolve? Is there a way to transfer assets? So we have information that the Western Native Recreation District could transfer assets. To dissolve the district, the citizens would need to gather signatures and a proportionate number of those of the electorate, submit those to the Secretary of State. It then becomes a ballot issue and it has to be a positive ballot issue. So we had originally thought that there was something that would, in the code, that would allow us to do that. There are other districts that have that. The Recreation District statute does not. So it's a more laborious process for us to go through. And we are, again, we have not made any formal decisions. We're here for a discussion. We can put everything on the table. Thought I better clarify that.
Mr. Palmer.
Madam Mayor, Sean, and forgive me if you mentioned it, but in this scenario, would the Recreation District then anticipate lowering their taxes because they would have, or would it be to then use the funds that they're not spending on the park on additional pools?
So that's a good question. We have not discussed that. If you look at the history of what the district has done, and one of the things that would be, I'll give you my personal preference. My personal preference would to see that reduce, right? If we have less assets, we would need less taxable revenue. Again, that's my personal opinion. I can give it to you here. We don't know what that looks like. There has been a request, I will tell you right now, that the Meridian School District has authorized swimming as a varsity sport. As many of you may know, the Meridian School District currently has 0 of those facilities available for practice and or meets. So that's one of the things that we anticipate being a partner in. We currently have the meets at the pool, but we don't have an indoor facility, and so we're limited by weather and how late we can go into the fall.
I think it is important to note that as we've had this discussion, it is with the understanding that the mill rate would be adjusted accordingly. We do have some rough estimates of what that potential operational or savings to Ward could be that should be reflected in a mill levy reduction.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
I think the only way, I mean, I can always be sold on other scenarios, but the only way I'm interested is if there's some level of finality to Ward, whether understanding the complications with dissolving it, but to me, I'd like to see us only pursue, transfer of all the assets and then a reduction of the taxes to 0. And then I don't want the appearance of Ward becoming kind of a park fundraiser slush fund for the city, so that we can only increase our own taxes 3%. Well, then there's, because a whole nother organization that is building parks and transferring assets to the city. So perception is reality. And so to avoid the perception and the reality of it, I'd only be interested if ward's taxes went to zero and we took over all the assets.
Madam Mayor, if I might make a comment. So again, I'm an elected official. All the commissioners are elected. That certainly in terms of would be, I would like to see something like that happen. Is there a phased approach? That's really what we're here to talk about is the city open to that happening? Is there a phased approach in which that happens? Is the park the first step? That seems like a natural step to me. But we are open to seeing that happen. And again, as an elected official, there are three of us on the board. I can tell you that a reduction in assets would, in my mind, and my vote, mean a reduction in the budget, the revenue that we would ask the community for.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
Sean, the mayor mentioned about partnerships related to the pool. Is that, when you talk about West Ada School District, is that the partnership? Are there other partnerships that are being explored? Can you give us some better understanding about that particular element?
Yes, thank you. So a couple different partnerships are being discussed. We've got, as I mentioned, a couple of the high school swim teams compete at the pool. There are a couple private organizations, the Streamliners, the Killer Whales, that are private swim race teams that are bringing forth proposals to, one of the questions is, can we add a bubble to the facility? Cascade recently built a facility with a bubble and has had great success in an environment which I think we can all agree is probably more harsh in the wintertime than ours. There's some challenges with that, but we are looking at, what are those public-private partnerships? To date, there hasn't been any capital private partners, but we are considering some of those and are certainly open to those as well.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
I think it's a great idea. I don't think it's terribly complicated to go forward, and with the way the city is now and with its developed parks, it seems to be the natural progression to at least take that first step. And a lot of assumptions. It's, assuming it's a transfer for, negligible, if any, real price. But it's a transfer of the assets, the budget decreases, taxpayer saves overall to a certain degree. We've got a more efficient maintenance of park facilities in the city, and you focus a little more on your core purpose of aquatics. The second stage, if and when that happens, of the city acquiring the pool and you budgeting down to zero, effectively eliminating ward, can be a second stage, seeing how the first stage goes, literally. So I don't know if we have to wait and eat the elephant all in one bite. The first part seems to make great sense.
One other private partnership that I neglected to mention is at Fuller Park, the Meridian Little League has had a long-standing relationship there. Currently is our partner and has been, as far as I can remember. In fact, in 1989, there was a league championship where a great catching performance was able to win that particular game that I remember vividly. So, but it's been a great organization, and we would certainly not. It's a group that you're familiar with and could be very comfortable with, and has been a great partner for us.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Burnt.
Mr. Walter, I like how you tell jokes with a straight face.
All right.
It's just, it's like, it's very natural for you to just let it go. I like that. So with putting the joking aside, I think that a partnership with the parks is pretty natural fit, in my opinion. I mean, we're in the business of parks. We have thousands of acres of parks, and I think that makes sense. I'm open to the idea of listening and learning more about the pools. I don't know if the city of Meridian is in the pool business, nor do we want to get into the pool business, but I certainly would be open to at least talking about it. But I agree with what Councilmember Borton mentioned and said about, the phases in which we would do that, so.
Okay, so council, I think that the direction that both Ward and the Parks Department, probably the Finance Department's looking for is there an interest to move forward and start dedicating more time and bring back a detailed plan? And certainly Ward's board needs to discuss it as well.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
I think along those notes, if it's going to require a citizen effort to eventually dissolve Ward, I think that we as a body need to also be thinking if that's something that we are also willing to support. I tend to agree with Councilmember Palmer on this particular piece, that I am more favorable of an all or none model. We have been in the park land business for a significant amount of time, but we've been in the community recreation district, if not longer. We weren't in the indoor gymnasium business until just a year and a half ago, and now we're in the midst of that. I'm supportive of the pool, I'm supportive of the parks, but I'm supportive of doing it all together as opposed to piecemealing it over a number of years. I think that if we're going to reduce the liability of the taxpayers, let's do it collectively. Let's do it arm in arm with Ward. Let's do it with the members of our community who I think would also support that as well.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milam.
I'm somewhere in the middle on this one, but with the support of the Parks Department, I don't have a problem taking on the park. But one of the things I remember discussing when I was just newbie at this job was how we do not want to be in the swimming pool business. And that was a money pit that we didn't want to get involved in. That's the conversations I remember having. So I am not like fully supportive of dissolving Ward and taking on a swimming pool. That being said, I'm not saying it's totally out of the question, but right now I think we should discuss the park, and I'm in favor of taking on the park, and I don't know about the pool. So.
Madam Mayor.
More information.
Can we hear from the other council members, and then I'll get back to Mr. Palmer. Ms. Lowell Roberts.
Madam Mayor, I tend to agree that I'd rather see it as a park. We already have the expertise in the parks, and so I would definitely like to pursue that opportunity to discuss that with more knowledge, assuming that it fits well within our inventory, especially we seem to have such a shortage of fields. It seems like adding fields would make sense for what we need for our citizens. They do such a great job with the pool. I think we can move forward more quickly and efficiently regarding the park, but I think there's a big deep dive, no pun intended, before we look at being in the pool business. So I would like to proceed with the information regarding taking over Fuller Park, but slowly consider if that's what we want to do in the long run, very hesitantly regarding the pool.
Well, and certainly you'd have to have Ward willing to even consider the pool as well, which at this point we're talking the park.
Just a quick clarification, and we're certainly open, again, to furthering a discussion and having anything. One of the things I just wanted to clarify real quickly in terms of the pool, operationally, our last year's budget, we had some staffing up with the new facility, and we had a net negative of about $12,000. So it's not, in terms of the pool facility, we teach more swim lessons at that facility for a reasonable rate and have low fees that allow anyone in there, and just our staff currently is doing a great job. I think a net negative $12,000 on an annual basis is a great job. So it's not a huge gap to make that difference.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Palmer.
My hesitation in the city getting into the pool business would be with building new pools. The thing is, the taxpayers of Meridian are already in the pool business, and the idea behind this conversation is to save the taxpayers money. And the reality is, if we only take the park and don't take the pool, you know, whatever mathematical equation comes out to a reduction in the taxes, the reality is it's not going to generate a net savings to the taxpayers. Whereas it's a mathematical logical scenario where if we take over all the assets and reduce their taxes to zero, there will in fact be a savings to taxpayers. But if we just take the park, then there's going to be, you know, an attempt to make sure that there's going to be sufficient still to cover expenses plus some, and it's not going to be, it won't be a net savings, which I think is the whole point.
I think if the transfer were to happen there, that would be something that both the ward elected officials and this body would ensure that there is that tax offset. So certainly I think that the city as well could do it more efficiently with the economies of scale but we need to dive deeper in the numbers to really get that. So those are things that we can bring back. And certainly after Ward has a chance to talk about it, because they'll have to talk about what their mill rate they want to set to a budget as well. So that would show what the savings would be.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Kavner.
I think to that point, and that kind of to dovetail on Councilmember Milam's comments, I too remember when I was first elected, we were told, oh, we don't want to be in the pool business. We can't be in the pool business. Pool business spends too much money. I guess I'd like a presentation to us as to why the city of Meridian being in the pool business is a bad idea. I'd like to know why there's opposition to it when the municipalities to the east and the west do that and cities across the country operate pool business. I know it's expensive. We've just been through our budget hearing where there's a significant amount of funding requests to the Parks Department because parks are expensive. Indoor court space is expensive. Aquatics is going to be expensive. I'm prepared for that for the benefit that it brings to our community, but I'd like to get a better understanding as to the subject matter experts, those that have been serving the community in such a long time, why they have the opposition to it so that I can better understand that.
And who do you want to invite in to talk?
Madam Mayor, I guess I would yield to you or to our Parks Director or to whoever has the opposition to aquatics to lead that conversation. I guess, Madam Mayor, for clarification, it's you who I heard we don't want to be in the pool business from, so I guess I'd look to yield to your expertise as to why.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Burt.
I feel the same way. I mean, I'm not totally excited about it, but I'm more than happy to have the dialogue. I don't know if we necessarily need to hear a presentation of why we shouldn't do it, but maybe have a conversation of just facts and just say, you know, this is it, boom, 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 this is how much it costs, this is the budget, this is what's going to cost, this is what we project. That type of discussion I'm open to hearing. I don't know if I necessarily need to hear a discussion about why we shouldn't do it.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Kavner.
And that seems sufficient to me. When the rhetoric is we shouldn't, I just wanted to get a better understanding as to why we shouldn't. Well, I think I know the reasons why we should, but I'm open to hear from those. Rather than just saying we shouldn't be in the pool business, I want to know why.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borden.
Maybe able to answer some of those questions right now. So Mr. Wardle or Mr. Moss either probably can come forward and answer them, but the start of the question is, Ward sets a budget of, what, $800,000? Okay, give or take. So they spend $800,000 a year to do pool and park. So if a city were to, right, super simple, but pool and park. So they spend that much. The city acquires pool and park. Ward budget's down to next to zero. Taxpayer saves $800,000 a year. City absorbs new general fund net loss expenditures annually of $800,000 a year. So it's that type of expense is probably one of, other than the logistics of knowing how to run a pool, that you have and we don't. But that's the financial, super simple math that might give some hesitancy to absorbing all of it without the offsetting revenue stream in light of the, the tight budget that we have. It's trying to find another $800,000 if we're truly going to create that savings. And I think these guys, using those simple numbers, Sean might be able to come up and correct any of that math that says, here's real generally how we spend our money. So if you guys were to take over a pool in a park, here's what you would have to be in store to pay for.
We'll have the expert
Hi
answer
there.
that.
I'm Carol White. I'm the Secretary Treasurer for the district.
Thanks, Carol.
And so our budget last year was, I think, $864,000. And over the last several years, we actually have been through the fact that we do so well at running the pool. We use our excess. We don't use that full $800,000, which I know, if that went away, we would have no opportunity to even look at the possibility of building new pools. We've been putting away between $300,000 and $400,000 in savings each year out of our tax levy, with the thought that we would continue to build more pools and more structures. That's how we were able to build our $3.1 million facility. The plan right now is that anticipating either covering the existing pool with a bubble with an estimated cost of somewhere between $100,000 and probably $500,000, which we don't have the budget for, which would require more saving, or a future plan was to add more lap lanes to the tune of, by the time we save up the money to do it, it'll probably be another $1 million. But that's where our excess surplus goes. We save that money. We paid cash when we expanded and put the new pool and pool building in. So any questions specific to the budget, I'd be more than happy to answer for you.
I think your approach sounds similar to the city's, so.
Yeah. And Madam Mayor, it sounds like that makes great sense. So assuming everything stayed the same and the city operated it hopefully as well as you do and had the foresight to maintain reserves for those long-term capital improvements, we still would spend operations plus savings $800 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The pool the budget shows that as being roughly half for the park and the other half to the pool, with the surplus from the pool operations going to savings for future building opportunities. Gotcha. We do not have any future plans at this time to build another pool other than another lap pool on our current piece of property.
Thank you, Carol.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol.
And I think the councils of the past have not been interested in aquatics because there was a recreation district that had that charter. As well, we had a recreation district that wasn't interested in merging. So this is a different time and a different ward board and council, and so that's why we're having these discussions now.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Milam.
I think it's an important factor in this. If somebody is going to bring us back a presentation and show us the numbers and how it plays out, I think a staffing study of some sort is also an important part of that, because what you guys are paying and the number of employees you have does not mean that's exactly the same that we would do. And so we need to look at it from our staffing perspective so that we really can understand the true costs. So whenever that happens, for that discussion, that'd be great. Thanks.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Borton.
Maybe a place to leave it is, again, several people have brought it up, really, that might start really with the ward board. The park is one thing, but if the aquatic center's in the conversation, that next step would be your board coming back to us saying we've discussed it and we're open to discussing a transfer of both. Because if your decision is because it's our main charge, we want to keep the aquatic center, well, then it's academic to discuss beyond that. So really lies in your court to come to us knowing that we're open to some or all of it.
Okay. So, and you meet the second Wednesday of the month? Is that third Thursday?
Madam Mayor, one last thing on it. The timing does matter because this really is a spring-summer decision one way or the other. You're going to set a budget, so if there were to be a transfer, even of the parks, you would want to do so in a way that allows you to adjust your upcoming budget to reduce it somewhat.
Sorry, when you start talking budget, you know, my little brain goes. Yeah, that would be
it's now
not an easy thing. If you were talking about the dissolution of Ward completely, it would not happen this year. That process requires 20% of the electorate on a petition, has to be done by next May to go to November. Yeah. So we're talking about a process that has a lot of time for discussion, but our budget meeting is August. Yep. So we have to, I think, move forward with our budget with the assumption that we're going to be needing funding for operating the pool next year at the very minimum. So I think that, yeah, we have to look at what our budget would look like both ways. But I'm just looking at the timeline for the process itself. We have to make the assumption that we're going to be operating the pool for at least another year.
Ms. Milam.
So I guess when you're looking at your budget and we're trying to figure out savings for taxpayers, are you going to reduce your budget by the 400? If you're actually thinking about dissolving, you'll have hopefully know that by then, or have some kind of a decision, so that you'll reduce your budget by the 400,000 that you've been saving every year? Because you won't need a savings for the following, you won't need an extra 400,000 for savings.
Right, if we made some kind of decision to move forward with that and we did that immediately, then we would have to adjust our budget accordingly. The transfer of assets it's an interesting process that involves not just the city and Ward, but the county as well. So if we do nothing with our assets and dissolve, the county gets them to do with what they will. So I think the general consensus is that if we could come to some kind of agreement with the city, that would be preferable than handing them over to Ada County to parcel out the way they want to. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further questions, comments?
Madam Mayor?
Ms. Milam.
So I guess I don't know if it's just me, I'm a little bit unsure of what, if we came to any kind of consensus about the park.
I think the ball is in Ward's court in terms of if they were interested in just the park or the park and the pool, how it'd be phased in, what it would look like. And that's certainly first their purview and what their approach would be, and they would come back and make an additional request to council.
Madam Mayor, but they don't have to be done at the same time, right? You're just waiting for them to let us know, because it seemed to me they were coming to us, asking us to take the park. No?
Madam Mayor, Councilman Milam, I would just say we're not looking for a final decision on whether or not to take the park tonight. But I haven't heard anybody say don't look into it at all. I've heard park, maybe or maybe not the pool, or all or nothing. I think what we need to do is take that feedback and go back to the drawing board, as it were, and do some research and analysis and work with finance and work with Ward, let them meet, decide their path forward, and we'll work together on a plan and be back for that discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
So you know what the costs would be.
So we can put together costs and things like that. It sounds like there's interest in going that next step. So, thank you.
So we'll add an agenda item to our next regular meeting. It will be a discussion of transfer of assets for the Western Ada Recreation District. And so the public is welcome to attend. Those are all open meetings. We will invite park staff, if that's okay, and watch our website for that next meeting, and then we'll report to you after that.
Thank you, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. Madam Mayor.
Thanks for joining us. Yes,
As-
Mr. Borton.
As part of that, two of the asks will be for our city, what, if any, additional costs might we incur to take on the park? Or do we be able to absorb it with existing personnel and equipment? And what might you be able to reduce your budget by were you to transfer out the park? So we can at least see what that net tax savings could be to the citizens.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, item 9B is budget workshop follow-up and discussion. Mr. Borton.
Madam Mayor, the brief note in the agenda showed we kind of got fired up and talked too long and lost the opportunity to speak as a group, kind of good of the order after the two-day budget presentations to see if there was any thoughts, initial questions, concerns. July 12th is the next full day, potentially, maybe less. It's okay to be less, budget hearing. And we've got finance in the back corner eagerly waiting. So it's sort of the open forum. If there was something that anybody wanted to throw out, great. A thought or a concern or a question. If not, that's fine too. Kind of closes that process, and then between now and the 12th, if there's something with meat on the bone, we can discuss with finance and the director and the mayor, and not, that's fine too. So.
Okay.
I don't have anything in particular. I just wanted to make sure we had this opportunity.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Palmer.
I have a couple comments. Too much paper. When someone's got a 30-page or 30-slide presentation that's going to be on these very expensive, fancy screens that are pointed at us, I don't want to look at it on paper. I mean, I understand somebody might, but I went through a lot of paper, and I didn't open a single one of those.
Ink.
A lot of ink. A lot of freaking ink. And then the only other thing, and I don't know, I may be the only one that feels this way, but I feel like, we get our annual report, and then we get another annual report at the budget hearing. A lot of the beginning of it is fluffy, feel good. Look how cool we are. Look who we are. I felt like that was, I was there to talk numbers and money. I'm more down for the, I want to know, how many people were hired, not necessarily who was hired. Talk to me about that during the annual meeting. I want to talk numbers and facts and figures and Homer Simpson.
Okay, other comments, questions?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Kavner.
Maybe a question, I don't know who to. So I was surprised that we had a budget presented to us that took the 3% and is spending $500,000 from the reserves. So part of what I think is my fiduciary responsibility to our taxpayers is to find places where we can cut. And I guess my question is, how would finance, or Madam Mayor, how would you like to see that data? I can bring it, my thoughts, to the meeting on the 12th, and that's my plan. But again, I don't know if I'm the only one that felt that way, that was surprised at the amount of both the increase and the reserve spend. And maybe some of you also have thoughts. Boy, maybe we don't need to fund X this year. Maybe we don't need to go to training Y this year. I don't know. My hope is that maybe we can have a little of that discussion. And if I'm the only one, then boy, it can be a short discussion and we can move on. But that some feedback or follow-up from either staff or from you, Madam Mayor, would be helpful in terms of efficiency for our meeting on the 12th.
And how to give your feedback?
Madam Mayor, I guess not so much in how to give the feedback. I think we all do a pretty good job of giving feedback. More it's, I've got a list of items that I think don't necessarily need to be included as enhancements for this year, or should, huh? Well,
Okay, do we want to talk to each other or, sorry, because Dean can't hear you. And you have his attention.
Madam Mayor.
Ms.
Sorry, Dean. Apologize for that. I was just telling him that that's kind of what I think what we're talking about right now is to do is to kind of give your list if you have one or discuss things that we can then absorb and think about and review and in hopes that it would be something that we have more time before the day that we're supposed to make a decision on.
I think Mr. Borton.
Yeah, that's just it. So the example is if someone were to have something that they thought shouldn't be in the budget, that in whatever department, they would go speak to that director and meet with you and say, I think item X should be cut. Educate me on why it's included. I missed it. Perhaps I'm missing something on why, and the director can explain it. Maybe whichever of us wants to eliminate that item might say, oh, I get it now, and now I'm okay with it, or might feel more resolved that it shouldn't be in the budget. So I think that's the onus on us to visit with the director and the mayor to say, here's my list before the 12th of items, if there is any, and get any explanation. That's my sense of it.
And we would love to provide any additional feedback and rationale as to why the budget was presented like it was. We would entertain any questions. Mr. Byrne.
So just to confirm, this is my first budget, so you would rather have me not come to the July 12th hearing or meeting with concerns. You would want me to come, you would want me to take care of those concerns with the respective directors before that, so that those questions are answered before July 12th.
Madam Mayor, one of the challenges, the July 12th hearing date's an important one because it sets that tentative budget that gets published. Once it's set, it can't go, and it's published, it can't go any higher. So, for example, if you have the conversation on the 12th and item X gets cut and it's $200,000, and there's discussion that should follow, and it's late July, and we say, oh my gosh, that actually makes sense now. I met with the director, and I want it back in.
Can't do it.
Can't bring it back in.
Okay.
I mean, in general, super simple numbers. Head nod the other way if I'm saying it wrong. So the idea hopefully is, right, if we have something, I want to cut X, meet with the director, and I'm like, oh, I still want to cut it. I've met with the director, met with the mayor, I get it. Might have a difference of opinion, but it hasn't changed mine. It hasn't been through a lack of research or due diligence. So then on the 12th, when we say I want to change something, the due diligence has been completed. So if a decision were to happen on the 12th, at least it's with the eyes wide open. Right. You just can't go back. That was the only thought. There's no magic to it, but.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
But definitely, if we're at the meeting, you have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Ask it. Because you know, if a director can't figure out what something is, probably shouldn't be in there. But the last couple of years, I guess it wasn't really a tradition yet, but you know, we had asked for and you had prepared a budget based on no tax increase, which I think is kind of our responsibility to the taxpayers, and that, you know, the taxpayers themselves are generally not in a position to, you know, plan out their year and then be like, you know what, I don't have enough for the stuff I want to do, so I'm just gonna increase my budget by 3%, and I got it covered. And so I think it's our responsibility to approach July 12th with that, okay, we're gonna do everything we can to meet our responsibilities, what's been expected of us as a city, as elected officials. And if there's just no way to do that, and in my opinion, we have life safety issues that need to be taken care of, then the 3% needs to have, that discussion needs to take place then. Not, we're just gonna assume we're gonna take this 3%, and by the way, we've got a savings account, we're just gonna go to town. It needs to be, we're not gonna touch any savings, and we're not gonna increase any taxes until we have completely vetted all other possibilities of moving dollars around.
I just will say that this council set the policy to save 0.5% to the public safety fund and 1% to the capital improvement fund, which is in that budget. And the savings is saved for capital improvement items, which they're being expended to. So we're not tapping into our savings for anything other than what we saved them for. And 1.5% of the 3% in the budget is to meet the policy as established by this council. So there's an explanation for some of the comments that you made. But I would be more than happy, and I know certainly all of our council would, to talk about any of the enhancements or other items in the budget book, and look forward to those questions.
Madam
Ms.
Mayor?
Slow Roberts?
One of the questions that I've had people bring up to me, and I know that we had the annual meeting that's potentially scheduled for November in the budget that rolled over, but I've had several questions asked regarding details of the event, if anybody will need to try to modify the budget before the 12th for potential overtime and expenses that departments could realize. But I sent you an email today trying to get some clarification on that.
Okay, I will answer those, but there is no overtime. So,
Madam Mayor, if there's items or topics you wanted to throw out, now's the time. I guess you can let council know if there's stuff like that following today will be dug into. Great. Not, okay, but if there's something.
okay.
I guess then, and maybe this, again, Mayor or Todd can kind of catch us up. I know that when we get together in February or March and start looking at each department, we all just kind of make the assumption, okay, we're going to look at the base budget, but when we get to these budget hearings, we don't talk about the base because we've already talked about that in February or March. What we don't know in February and March is that we're automatically taking the 3% and spending $500,000 from our savings account. So to me, when we're at that level of spending, for me, it should open up the door for discussion about base budget items. And are we, does that training to, Organization X in Pittsburgh, that may make sense in February, but does it make as much sense in July? And quite frankly, Councilmember Palmer said something in our last meeting that has really stuck with me, is that, am I willing to raise taxes to fund X? And I think that's a really great perspective to have. When we look at a lot of the enhancements that are before us, when we look at the significant amount of travel, I've shared, and many of us have talked about my concern about the coffee fund that doesn't fund coffee. Is that an appropriate amount? Can we reduce that amount, use it for a miscellaneous fund, which is being used for anyways, but have it better reflect what the intention of that fund is? Those are all concerns of mine, and they, to me, are magnified when the budget that's presented to us automatically takes that 3% and automatically spends $500,000 out of our savings. I think in times that we have growth, we can be taking advantage of those growth dollars, use them more effectively. And if we can't, because there is a demand on our public safety element, which is very, very important, then we should, just as quickly as it is a decision to raise taxes, we should be making just as quick of a decision to maybe find areas where we can reduce our costs. And that's where I'll be presenting.
Okay, well, I look forward to your questions, and I'm sure so do each of the subject experts in each of the departments through our department directors.
No, I think that was more just kind of like we summarized. I'm not supportive of taking the 3%. I don't think we should. That's what I thought this discussion was about.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kavner?
Oh, the question, Councilmember Gordon, I think, was inquiring if if we were going to talk about that now, and I said that I wasn't prepared, that I thought that today's conversation was more designed to be kind of a summary that we normally do at the end of our first budget meeting. And so that's what I was more prepared to say, is I think that there's an opportunity here where we can find areas to cut costs, that I'm not supportive of taking the 3% this year. I think that we need to find areas to reduce our costs before we automatically jump to increasing taxes.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
And you three and everyone else over there are just amazing, by the way. Just in my rant and complain about the couple little minor irrelevant things at the beginning, I just can't tell you how much I appreciate all the work that you guys put into it and how quickly you respond to things and how precisely, and you're awesome. Okay, that was all.
Okay, Mr. Borton. Okay. Okay. Anything you want from the finance department?
If you want direction from us, come ask.
Any direction?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Thank you for the good words there, Ty. Again, as Jenny and the mayor have communicated, we've put this budget presentation schedule to allow you guys to communicate with us and get us the information. We've developed a budget process starting in February so we can discuss key items throughout the 6-month process. So we extend again to you to reach out to us. Let us know if you have items of concern so we can start the discussion now. And we can start that dialogue instead of probably waiting until July 12th. If you have some items that you want to put on the whiteboard, send them out via an email. Good, this is what I want to talk about, guys. Can we start putting some dialogue together and discussion? So on July 12th, if we haven't discovered or solved that discussion item, we can have a contextual or a good informed discussion. Like you, Mr. Kevin, you say you'd like to be prepared. If you get us the information, we get prepared. Genesis, if you give us an item now, we can start preparing ourselves for a good discussion on July 12th so that both you and the directors and departments are informed and ready to respond to any inquiries that you have. So I'll just echo what the mayor and Jenny have promoted to you guys. Communicate with us, let us know what you need, and we'll be prepared to have a great discussion and hopefully have a balanced budget by the end of July 12th. That's what we need from a finance department. We'll be prepared to answer any questions about 3%, any questions about why we need to do this or that. Again, we'll be prepared to answer that now on any emails that you send us. I'll be happy to get that dialogue going now or on July 12th. So again, just reach out to us, please. Start the communication dialogue now rather than July 12th. I think that'll be the most beneficial for the production of that day. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Okay, moving on, item 10. Future meeting topics. Anything under this?
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
I'm really disappointed. I was hoping it would be on this week's agenda, as I think it's extremely urgent that we have a conversation about projects that are in the pipeline and whether we want to put them on notice that we're not going to be approving them, or what news we can get out to the development community about whether we're open for business or not, considering what happened last week.
I think that Councilman Borton addressed that in his comments, that one approval denied doesn't mean all approvals denied. We are going to have a conversation in the July workshop led by the Community Development Department on development, what is in the pipeline, and what's been approved for preliminary plats, final plats, and give a better snapshot of growth in Meridian. But I think one denial doesn't mean the business of new applications are closed.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Palmer.
I think that as a policy doesn't really kind of get us anywhere. You know, we can't act like a barbershop who's got that pair of scissors only cuts every other hair, you know, to kind of thin it out. We need to have kind of an established reasoning as to what kind of projects we're interested in or what we're not, rather than telling people, you know what, depends on how council feels that night as to whether your project might be too big, might be too small, might not have, you might have everything that you've asked for, but you know, maybe, I mean, there was no rhyme or reason really as to what happened last week. The guy literally brought everything anybody on this board has ever asked for, and it was denied. So the reasoning was...
All I can say is that we'll have a discussion next month, and the rationale from the individual council members and how they voted, I think you're minimizing their votes. But we can have that discussion on the July workshop, which is the 10th, and get some feedback from council members as to our development applications and expectations. What is Premier? We had a discussion about that earlier. Okay, just let upcoming events. Cable One Movie Night is the movie Ruby on Saturday, Main Street Market. It kicked off at Dairy Days every Saturday until Memorial Day. There's no city council next week, and Independence Day family celebration in Story Park starts at 3 to 10:30 p.m. And there's a lot going on with bands, fireworks, and all the way down to a three-legged race. So hopefully you'll join if you're in town. Parks would love to have you there and see your support. And I know there's a movie night or something that night too, somewhere. Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session.
Madam Mayor.
Mr. Borton.
We go into executive session pursuant to Idaho State Code 742061, A, B, and J.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn into executive session. Mr. Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Mylum?
Aye.
Councilmember Burnt?
Aye.
Councilmember Palmer?
Aye.
Councilmember Little Roberts?
Aye.
Councilmember Cavanagh? Aye. Councilmember Borton?
Aye.